Hello guys, so good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lu Mingxu from the DJI Enterprise as the solution engineer based in Australia, and mainly responsible for the technical support. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. So Manny is from EE Group as the general manager, so who will walk you through the regulatory impact on Australian market. And Dylan, senior regulatory consultant from Hawaii UAV, who will give you a deep insight and detailed introduction regarding broad area BVLOS presentation. So we are very happy to have all of you here today, and together we will bring a complete perspective from regulatory operation and technology. So for today's session, we will last like around the 1 hour. So we will leave like 10 minutes for Q&A. So please just feel free to drop your questions on the top of the red check box at any time. So the theme for today's webinar is Australian BVLOS faster track CASA's new approval pathways with DJI Dock. So our goal is to help operators to better understand how this new approval can help you to benefit your BVLOS operation. So let's just get started. Okay, let's just just go to the next page. The previous one. So we began with Dock 1, launched in the April 2023, which marked the start of the true automation for industrial drone workflows. So it introduced the concept of remote unattended missions and proved that automated operations were not only possible but highly valuable for the real-world applications. So 1 year later, when it comes to the March 2024, we released the Dock 2, a platform that was smaller, tougher, and significantly more deployable. Dock 2 reduced the weight, improved portability, and brought the automation to places where Dock 1 could not easily reach. And now in February 2025, we introduced Dock 3, representing the next leap forward. So Dock 3 is where intelligence truly comes to life, smarter workflows and deeper integration. So next one. So as many of you know, operating a drone system under the ESA specific category is not easy. So it requires a large amount of documentation, concept of operation, SORA, operation manuals, and also some technical evidence, training requirements, and etc. So for many operators, preparing all of this, from scratch can make, it can take something like a month, and the quality of the documents directly affects, whether your application is accepted quickly or delayed for weeks. So that's why DJI creates, a complete, documentation package to help you accelerate this process to ensure that your application is aligned with the, local regulatory from day one. And in addition to the full compliance documentation package, I also want to highlight that, DJI Dock 3 is supported by a set of purpose-built software and hardware features designed to meet, these critical operational and regulatory requirements in different countries. So as you can see that we have the, the geocaching and advanced, the geofencing capability that allows, operators to strictly define the, the flight boundaries of the aircrafts. So this can ensure, the drone will remain within the approved operational volume at all times, which is quite essential for SORA-based missions and for, demonstrating a strong level of commitment to competent, authorities. And operators can, also configure the geocache directly in the missions planning interface. And also we have compatible, the DJI Dock 3 is compatible with the third-party parachute systems. So parachute is quite essential and is often requirements when operating in high ground risk areas, or when the authority requests additional containment measures. And also DJI Dock 3 delivers robustness at an industrial level, with a very high IP ratings that ensures the system can operate reliably in harsh outdoor environments. So this is especially important, for something like a long-term automated and some, remote area deployments where dust, rain, and temperature variations are part of, everyday operations. And also a high level of environmental protection gives, the operators the confidence and their system will continue, to perform safely and consistently throughout the mission, life cycle. And together with these features, they are not just only support, regulatory approval, but also can enhance the real world, the safety and the reliabilities. And next one. Oh, and by the way, I would like to make an important clarification. Although this compliance document, package is primarily developed, according to EASA standards, but many of the concepts and methodologies, such as operational risk assessment, documentation structure, safety procedure, and containment, strategies are also highly relevant to the Australia, regulatory environment under CASA. And you can see here is the link for the, the documentation package. So you can just access to it, anytime that you want. And next one. Yeah. So speaking of what's included in the documentation package, let me just walk you through each part of the package quickly. So the first of all, obviously, is the concept of the operation. So we provide a fully structured, CONOPS template that follows, EASA's recommended, format. So it covers you, the operational environment, mission objectives, ground and air risk considerations, and etc. And second is the SORA framework. So the package includes, this thorough, methodologies. It guides you step by step through every phase of SORA, like the air risk, ground risk, and the risk buffer, and etc. And the third one is the operations manual. So the operations manual provides, a full set of procedures that you can customize. So which covers like, the standard, operating procedure, emergency procedure, and etc. And also we have the, the training syllabus, and it defines, the remote pilot's qualification, and etc. And also we have the, the technical, documentations. So this includes, the technical evidence that regulators normally request, something like the functional, hazard assessments, and the system specifications. And next one. So what does all of this mean, for the operators? So you can see that, several benefits here. So like the fast authorization. So because all the templates are pre-aligned with the EASA expectations, you can reduce, document preparations time from months to weeks. And also, it's strong regulatory alignment. So everything in the package follow the, the compliance. And also it's proven, the risk mitigation approach. So this the included assessments allows you, to present a strong, risk mitigation framework, and supported by, the functional hazard assessment and OSO mapping. And also we have the, the adaptability framework. While the documentation is built on, European, standards, it can be adapted for the specific requirements of each national aviation authority. And you can see that the DJI Dock 3, the documentation package is designed to make your approval journey smoother, faster, and more reliable. It's not just a set of documents. It is something like a complete compliance toolkit that brings you much closer to scalable, real-world, autonomous, operations in different countries. So if you would like to support in customizing these documents for your operation, so I think our ecosystem partners like the Huawei UAV and the E Group, they are here to help. And thank you very much. I will hand over the presentation to Manny.
Hello everyone. I think I'm just share. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Today, well, mainly I want to share a bit of what we have done in 2025 and what opportunity we see in 2026 in terms of industry trends and where the new applications we have been hearing from the market. All right, so from in 2025, looking back at the market, one of the things we see, I think the highlight of our sales here is the growth of the Dock. So as Lumen mentioned before, the Dock 2 released around the early 2024 Q2. Now you can see it has been growing quite fast, especially in 2025 Q4. There is a very big jump of sale quantity. Not to mention the 2025 hasn't finished yet. We're expecting this number to have more. Where we are seeing the demands on the Dock are mainly from a couple of the verticals and applications. For example, the biggest one we've seen this year, especially later this year so far, is from agriculture. So we've been hearing demands and pushing solutions in scenarios such as bird deterrence for orchards, broad acre, food processing places, crop growth with AI analysis as a solution from some of our partners, and as well as livestock management. So there's a huge demand on agriculture. People are getting on board with new technology. The next second biggest one I would say is inspection. Including the solar panel inspection for substations. We are seeing more and more algorithm and platform that can help with wind turbine defect inspection using small drones or sometimes even Dock as well. There are partners using third-party payload to detect gas leaking in chemical plants and refinery plants. We are seeing actually growing demands from security and public safety. And this part, I think, is still in a very early stage, but the demand is very high. So we're saying people are asking for Dock to do remote asset patrol, roadwork traffic monitoring. We've got people using Dock to monitoring events like concerts, sometimes protests, to see the situation of a crowd. And also we have partners doing using drone to do coastline monitoring for search and rescue, to look at sharks and the waves, something similar things. So that's what's happening in 2025, and looking at 2026, we also did some sort of analysis in terms of what opportunities we have collected and what we have achieved. Now in 2025 overall, not just stock, but overall in the drone product sales, we're seeing actually a very big portion, almost 65% of the growth are coming from agriculture. What we have learned is farmers, agriculture businesses in Australia, they actually get some new technologies very fast. Depends on the season, when would they, depends on when will they have the cash flow, and there are times surges in purchase, especially after the harvested their crops and vegetables. When they got the cash, they would seriously consider investing into next cycle. We didn't have too much in security and inspection, but mainly, especially inspection, has been a very mature market. Security, as I mentioned, is still quite early industry for drone in Australia, at least. One of the reason I think challenges light before in front of our security companies are the regulation. Not just the BVLOS, but for a company who has never done a drone, they need to train people, they need to get the REOC. Eventually, BVLOS, if they want to get into autonomous operation, which is why we want to work with companies like Hover UAV to bring our people more support on this process to reduce the bar, the difficulty to get into the industry. And when we look at the new opportunities that we have collected in 2025 that hasn't been landed yet, but very promisingly, we think we should get the very optimistic results in 2026 on the right chart. Mining is still the biggest one, and which is also one of the biggest application for Dock, followed by inspection and still agriculture, which both of them have around 12% portion within our project lead pool. So I think these things give us an idea as an EE Group, as a master distributor, give us an idea where we should put more resources in. Security, it's a bit smaller than agriculture, but it's coming. We already got security companies asking how they can get into drone business. We're sort of trying to work with our UAV and to provide certain guidance to make this people have a better understanding faster how to get into the business. Now, in terms of EE Group, what we do and what we are going to do with all the trends in the verticals and scenarios we have discovered in 2025, the key thing for us is our solutions. That's what we want to switch from just providing a DJI products to eventually provide a total solution. The solution is not just the drone and combined with accessories, that includes software, that includes service as well. I would say the three most important aspects. The first we are planning to do is AI training support. A lot of the applications I mentioned, such as livestock management, traffic management, they need AI training. We have partners starting to doing that. The process isn't that hard, but it requires time. We need partners to work with us together, collecting data sets, and we can help with the training actually to help people to provide more than just the hardware. The second is integration. As I mentioned, I think security is one of the key market we want to go into, and one of the key demands, for example, in security, is integrations between the drone system and CCTV alarm platform as well. For us, that's something we want to help our partners, either it's new partners or even certain projects, to help with the software platform integration, so we can have a multi-industry sort of solutions that we can provide. And third would be an ecosystem. So here I'm putting mostly the payload and accessories for drone. We have a lot of requirement that weirdest demands from all kinds of different industry. DJI right now, they have a very good platform But at the moment, DJI also works with a lot of eco partners to provide different payloads, different software to accommodate DJI solution and be able to be able to support in more industry and scenarios. So this is what we're trying to do, to build the whole DJI ecosystem towards more than just a drone company, but a solution company. For us, E Group, for those who ever are based in Australia, and most of you guys probably already know us by name, or probably already our customers. For people who are joining from overseas, as one of the top guys in joining the stream in Australia, we are very welcome. If you have any ideas in your country, any requirement from your customer, we encourage you to have a discussion with us, share some of the information, see what we are actually doing. So here we have our LinkedIn page here. We often post some of the interesting case on our social media, YouTube as well. Have a look, follow us. If something inspire you, get some results, we're more than happy to hear about it. And like I said, if you have even a requirement you would like us to help, some of solution you would like to promote in your country, we're more than happy to support you, and discuss with you. All right, so this is pretty much about us, what we see in the market. I think without further ado, next we'll have Dylan from Hover UAV. That's the main topic today.
Hello everyone, I'm just going to go ahead and share my presentation and we'll get right into it. All right, so I'm here to talk to you today about the BVLOS pathways in Australia. But first, I'll just talk a little bit about who Hover UAV is. So we are a drone regulatory and services company that focuses on safety and compliance and the regulatory approvals in Australia. We're based out of the Gold Coast in Queensland, but we do provide our services kind of around the globe, reaching as far as Europe and the Middle East, and also to our neighbours in New Zealand. And we do most of our work here in Australia. So we do provide everything when it comes to regulatory services, starting from the smallest approvals, getting the initial set up, for instance, all the way through to the really complex areas like your broad area BVLOS approval. And we also do a lot of training services as well, covering everything from just the most basic introduction to SORA all the way through to training you up to be the responsible person for a broad area approval. So without further ado on that, we'll jump into the different types of BVLOS approvals we now have. I just want to give a little bit of background on the two different ones before we get into the real detail around broad area BVLOS. So the new broad area BVLOS approval allows you to self-assess areas as an operator that come out to a specific risk criteria. And there's really strong guidance from CASA about what these risk criteria are, what makes an acceptable mitigation, what the population densities you can operate in is. It's a really thorough TMI that they release that gives you all the information you need, so nothing is vague in terms of how you approach it. And it's also going to allow operators to rapidly deploy their BVLOS operations. So you won't be waiting in a queue anywhere from 3 to 6 months for an approval. We've seen people who have successfully acquired this approval able to turn around these feasibility assessments in a matter of days and deploy to new BVLOS sites, which is very exciting and very new for our industry. The broad area approvals work with aircraft up to 3 meters and is most flexible with aircraft up to 1 meter in size. And we will get into the 4 different pathways of broad area approval first after I've gone through this initial context. Now, there are also standard BVLOS approvals. They still exist. They are still necessary. Those must be assessed by a CASA inspector. And they offer you the greatest flexibility in ground and air risk and all different environments, including what mitigations you can use. And a 4 RPA up to 40 meters in size. Haven't seen one that big yet, but definitely around that 8 to 10 meter zone. So there are common factors between a broad area BVLOS approval and a standard BVLOS approval. Regardless of which path you take, you will need to develop BVLOS flight procedures, not just procedures for assessing the feasibility of an area, but then how will you actually control the aircraft? How will you operate beyond visual line of sight is a must across both cases. If you're a first-time applicant, you'll also need to go into the field with a CASA inspector and do a BVLOS flight test. This is different to your responsible person interview as well. You'll actually be demonstrating your BVLOS flight procedures and some simulated emergencies to the inspector in that test. All BVLOS operations will require an OTAN unless advised otherwise. There are very rare circumstances where air services may say that one is not required. And all BVLOS operations will require a radio or VHF solution because a key mitigator to BVLOS operations is being able to talk to other aircraft in the area. So you do need a solution that's on site where you're flying, even if you happen to be on the other side of the country. So just something to consider. And again, unless otherwise advised, there are some controlled areas or areas near aerodromes where the radio calls can be considered a little too much. And you may work out with CASA and air traffic control to not do them in that case. So we'll start with the broad area approval process itself. What does it look like? What are the phases? So to begin with, you'll need to do all your prep work. This is getting all of your documentation together. So you'll need to develop procedures to assess an area's feasibility, and they need to be in accordance with the temporary management instrument for broad area approvals. Now, these procedures need to thoroughly cover how a responsible person will go about assessing if an area meets the requirements for broad area operations. You'll also need to get your responsible person trained up for the CASA assessment and the interview. So this means ensuring they have the necessary qualifications present in your company, such as a BVLOS Octa or IREX pass. Doesn't necessarily need to be the responsible person or the CRP who has that. That is more of a qualification for the pilot. But that does give you a really good insight into BVLOS activities. So it's a good first step. And you can also come to Hover as well for training on responsible persons, which also includes a bunch of templates that help you along the way. You'll also need to develop those BVLOS flight procedures I mentioned, which are about how you operate the aircraft beyond visual line of sight. And then once you've got all of that together, you'll submit that through to CASA and you'll move on to the next stage after a short wait in the queue, which will be your assessment. So during the assessment process, you will have to complete a feasibility assessment of an area that's provided to you by CASA and also of one that you nominate yourself, and probably pick one that you want to use in the future so you don't double up on work, and that can be your first one where you go flying. You'll then have your responsible person interview with CASA, which we do have a bit of content later on about what that interview is like. And if it is your first BVLOS application at all, you'll have that flight assessment as well. They will issue you a training instrument so you can go out in the field and practice your flight procedures too. Lastly is operations. So once CASA are satisfied with everything, they'll issue your instruments. You'll actually receive 4 instruments for a broad area BVLOS approval as opposed to just the one for a standard approval. And these will be instruments for the different pathways through to completing broad area BVLOS. So your responsible person interview. What's that like? We've had a couple of our clients go through it now. We've gone through it ourselves as an organization. And it is very much in that interview, CRP interview format, where you're kind of interviewing for the job. So you will be asked a lot of questions about your 2 submissions, and they will mainly be focused on how did you reach your feasibility assessment outcome? How did you record your decision-making process is really important. What kind of tools did you use to assess the air and ground risk? What was your interpretation of different maps and charts? And how did you go about documenting these points? So something that will really smooth out your interview process is if you document in your submission how you determine something. So I looked at this chart and I found this information and I went off and checked the URSA and I came to this conclusion. That's going to save you a lot of time in your interview because you won't have to step people through that. And keeping that kind of information is actually going to be important to record keeping later on. So it's good to start it from the beginning and make sure that forms a part of what you submit before your interview. You'll also need to explain a bit about HMI impacts, the human-machine interface, particularly because you'll be assessing a range of different areas without a high level of oversight from CASA. And because of that, they'll want to be sure that you have a good understanding of how the different areas you're operating in will affect your operators. You also need to show some preparedness to face a bit of business pressure where an area might be 99% in an area, but 1% out of what you can approve. and there's a bit of pressure to just get it done instead of go for a traditional approval, which will take a few months, there may be some questions around how do you prepare yourself to handle that pressure coming down from other areas of the business, and what steps will you take to make sure that you stick to your approved procedures. There'll also be some questions around reporting and documentation retention, and also understanding and recording how all of the decisions were made. And lastly, you'll probably have to give a bit of an overview about what your remote pilot training and currency and skills maintenance programs are like. So once we've done all of that, what does broad area enable for us? So there are some common factors regardless of which of the 4 pathways you operate under. A couple that are just specific to this presentation. So when I'm talking about a CASA approved PRS later on, it just means that it's been accepted by CASA. They popped that up on the CASA website. We'll provide you with a link where you can find that. And that it's not going to transfer more than 80 joules of energy upon impact to a person. And we'll talk about how you calculate that as well. Now, all of your operations must be below 400-foot AGL, except where you're operating over the excavated area of a mining site. So they are okay in that instance for the ground to fall away underneath you. In that very specific case, you don't need to worry about exact terrain tracking. You must not be operating within 10 nautical miles of a civilian or military controlled aerodrome. And you must not be operating within the no-fly zone of a non-controlled aerodrome, HLS or ALA, unless you've conducted coordination with the aerodrome and its users. And I will just note that you probably need very thorough stakeholder engagement in this case. I talk to CASA a lot on BVLOS approvals about stakeholder engagement. They're going to want to see a thorough report of who was in and out, how did you identify who was in and out, and then how did you go about contacting them. And you definitely want to record keep any communication you have with another airspace operator. So your operations must also not be within 1 nautical mile laterally and 300 feet vertically of a published VFR route. Must not be in areas where structures are unlikely to provide sheltering or be in use at the time of operations. Now, this one does really only apply if you're using sheltering as mitigation, which we'll talk about in the next 2 slides. And as well, must not be in areas where a higher population density than is permitted will be present, even if that is a transient population density. So for instance, that might look like an event in a park, or during school hours, you expect the population density of a nearby school to be much higher. So the pathways themselves. Pathway A is for RPA with a size not above 1 meter at its longest measurement. Now, I've actually got this DJI M30 here just to do a quick demonstration on this because we see a lot of confusion on the maximum dimension of an RPA. So the diagonal wheelbase specification goes from motor to the other motor. The maximum dimension though is actually going to be a little bit higher than that. As you can see, the prop comes a little further out than the motor. So you want to go from prop tip to prop tip. So for instance, the DJI M30 here does not meet the 1 meter. It's actually just over, but the following Dock drones, the DJI M3D/T and the M4D/T certainly do. Now your RPA maximum speed should not be commandable above 25 meters a second, and that does include tailwind if you're using a wind speed system. The DJI Dock systems are ground speed based, so the maximum speed is just the maximum speed. And then we split the pathways up based on population density and ground risk area. So if your ground risk is not above 50 people per kilometer squared or not above 500 people per kilometer squared, with suitable sheltering to reduce the number of people who are exposed to the RPA to less than 50 people, it falls under A1. If the ground risk area is not above 2,500 people per kilometer squared and there is suitable sheltering and you use that CASA approved PRS, that will be A2. Pathway B follows a very similar scope. It just moves the RPA size up to 3 meters and maximum speed up to 35 meters a second. So for A1, those numbers are going to be the key figures of not above 5 people per kilometer squared or not above 50 with suitable sheltering to bring it back down to 5. And then for B2, it'll be 250 people per kilometer squared with that suitable sheltering again and an approved PRS again. What is sheltering? So this is a question that we have to talk about quite a lot because there's a lot of different things that could contribute to a person being sheltered versus a person not being sheltered. And we don't always have the same line of thought here that CASA does. We have generally found that sheltering is anything sufficient in nature to prevent the RPA from penetrating through it and hitting someone inside. So that would be things like mostly closed buildings, office buildings, shopping centers, etc. Probably wouldn't apply to a stadium, which has one closed face and one open face, for instance. Shipping containers or temporary structures that are enclosed on all sides. Cars, buses, and trains are also sheltering. That is under certain speeds. So generally that speed is accepted to be 60 kilometers per hour. And of course, houses, suburbia. Now, the operator does bear an evidentiary burden to prove sheltering is effective, should it be questioned. So make sure when you're doing your analysis that you're not just claiming sheltering's there because you've seen some structures. You are having a look at what they are, what the population density over that bit of sheltering is, and making sure that it's appropriate. Now, your parachute recovery system. So there's a few extra caveats to consider with a PRS. So there's the basic minimum requirements. So there'll be a minimum deployment height that you need to be aware of and you need to operate at. And there'll also be a maximum wind speed of the PRS itself. But there will also be operational requirements. So you need to ensure that you're actually separated from people during the launch, ascent, and descent and recovery stages. Because if you don't have that separation when you're operating, the PRS is not actually a mitigator in that factor. There's also a maximum wind speed to achieve that 80 joules we talked about. And what this is talking about is actually a calculation. So you can see it over there on the right. It's wind speed plus descent rate to equal your total speed. And then your kinetic energy calculation will be half mass times total speed squared. So bit of math, you can get a calculator for it. But it does mean that you have to factor in wind speed. So for instance, we found that to transfer no more than 80 joules, the operational restriction of about 4 to 5 meters per second of wind needs to apply to an M3D with an AVSS parachute. The other thing I'll just quickly mention on parachutes as well, when we talk about minimum deployment height, is you need to consider your operational needs. So if you're an energy provider and you're inspecting equipment that's 20 meters high and you need to be 5 meters above it at most, you'll find that a lot of parachutes only become effective around the 30 to 40 meter mark. So in that case, you're not actually going to be able to use the parachute as an effective mitigator and complete the task. And it won't be an effective use of that parachute if you're constantly ducking down into areas where the population density says it needs to be effective. And the last thing to consider with your PRS is training and maintenance programs. So you want to make sure that your pilots are fully trained on how to use the system effectively and that you have a maintenance program in place. The PRS systems can be a little finicky. So you want to make sure that you're following the provided OEM manuals to the T. Ground risk planning. So when you're starting to conduct your feasibility assessments, we want to go through some of the tools that you can use to make that assessment easy. So the first one we'll talk about is ABS population data. It is considered the gold standard for population data in Australia. A lot of other tools use it. And you can get that from the ABS website. You can either just go through an interactive map and see the grid squares on a 1 kilometer basis, or you can actually get a downloadable file that works with Global Mapper and ArcGIS if you have those mapping skills, which can be a really good way to also overlay your operational area onto a population density grid and see what your impacts are directly, as opposed to trying to reckon where you know you're operating on one screen and where the population density is on another. Landscan is also a great stop for a visual representation on a satellite grid. It gives you an overlay of the population data in those 1 by 1 kilometer grid squares. And you can also draw in a polygon of your area and then ask it to calculate what the population density and the raw population value is. Soramate, which is a tool that we helped co-develop, does kind of the best of both worlds. So you can develop your KML in it, but you can then take that KML and directly overlay the 1 by 1 population grid within the Soramate tool itself. It will actually pick out the densest area for you, tell you what population grid it is, and tell you what the population density is and the raw count as well. But even as just a KML creation and checking tool, you can still see all of that information as well before you dig into creating a SORA. And lastly, Google Earth. I can't underestimate the value of Google Earth when it comes to just getting satellite information, particularly because even though it's not the most robust collection of businesses and places on the planet, it does bring that all together in one tool. And it's very easy to scan for things that you would have otherwise missed if you have places turned on Google Earth. And I can't tell you how many times that I've thought, oh, this place is perfect. It's a sail to, easy, saw a safety case. Gone and had a look at it in Google Earth, and a business has popped up that blends into the background. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a population density risk. Airspace planning tools. So I have a QR code here that links to where all of these are located if you want to take a screen grab of that. So there's a huge variety of airspace planning tools you can use. I would strongly recommend looking at the visual navigation charts, even if you are using a digital tool like AVCRM, OK2Fly, Soramate, etc. Visual navigation charts have a lot of handy additional information, particularly around VFR routes. They make it super easy to find them. And they also give you the excellent keys for what all of the different symbols mean, not all of which come across into the CASA approved apps. ERC low is also really useful if you're operating in a very remote area because it gives you coverage that the VNC doesn't have. And it tells you where all of those flight routes are, connecting all of the outback airports and things like that. So just something to consider. So broad area BVLOS use cases. Where have we seen it applied and where do we think it'll go? So the first and obvious one is infrastructure. If you work in the infrastructure field, be that delivering electricity, gas, anything else, transport, being able to rapidly deploy along your network during an emergency in response to some kind of outage or report of damage is invaluable to you. And it's something that a lot of our clients have been asking for a long time, and we're very happy that it's here and it's being put into good use. The other thing that a lot of people are doing is it's giving them the opportunity to finally scope out massive, thousands of kilometers long runs of space that would have been too cost prohibitive before to do under a BVLOS application just because of the size of the layout of infrastructure. And it's giving them the ability to scope that out in-house, internally, develop their procedures and approaches to it, and do things like installing drone-in-a-box solutions like the Dock systems at tactical locations throughout the network to absolutely maximize their coverage. And it's letting you consider this in a way that you couldn't really do under a standard BVLOS case unless you had the resources to really invest a lot of time into the research. For our friends in the mining industry, it lets you deploy to potential new sites quicker than ever before. As I mentioned, you can get an assessment done within days as opposed to within months, which means you can be out there scanning for new resources and potential. And it will also allow you to expand existing sites faster. So a lot of organizations that have a current BVLOS approval could look towards broad area if they're planning on continuing to expand their operation over the years for a long-term savings potential. Lastly, to all of our fellow drone services providers, how many times have you been asked to demonstrate a BVLOS demo and you've had to ask someone to come down to your little test area because it's the only BVLOS area that's feasible for you to test in? And if you wanted to test it on their site, you would have to go through this whole application process, wait a few months to get it approved. No longer. We can now bring BVLOS demos directly to the clients that are after them in areas where they will find them useful, providing them with data that they want to use day to day. So it's a huge win for anyone in the services side of RPAS. And it also lets you expand your footprint faster and faster as well. So if you have successful BVLOS operations and you have clients who are ready to pounce on adding additional sites, but they're not too thrilled about the queue wait again, then you can go ahead and you can get it in, do it within a few days' time, complete your feasibility assessment, and be ready to deploy very rapidly. Reporting and record keeping. So this is a very important element of the broad area BVLOS approval. So the golden rule is 7 years in aviation. We keep basically everything for basically that amount of time. And in a broad area BVLOS, you must keep all of the details that relate to your feasibility assessment. So that would be things like what maps, charts, and data sources you used, what mitigations you identified, why you decided certain mitigations applied at all, and historical imagery that informed your decision. So this all ties together in one big piece of advice, which is if you go on Google Maps and you determine that this structure is suitable sheltering, take a screenshot, add it to your feasibility assessment, note the date and time when you did it, and keep it, because data changes all the time. We've had approvals that have changed under us in the short time that we've had this approval, just because of new airspace being introduced. So making sure that you are taking the time to record all of your decision-making steps. And again, it's something that if you go through our responsible person training, you'll receive templates that guide you through how to do this as well. It's going to help protect you in the future. Should you have an audit or surveillance event, you will be able to confidently say, yep, I determined this was sheltering because of this reason. I know it looks different now, but here's a picture of how it looked back then. Probably don't need to go to the extent of taking pictures of individual charts, but definitely recording, the date and version of the chart that you use will be helpful as well. You should also be keeping all of your flight records regardless, but in terms of broad area BVLOS approval, that looks like your authorizations, your risk assessments, flight logs, and if you do record them, your checklist actions as well. And an important aspect to attach to the job is which of the 4 instruments you're actually operating under, because you will receive 4 different ones. So it's important to attach the correct instrument that you're operating under for the approval so that the conditions you're operating under match up to the job you were doing. There's also reporting requirements for CASA that are detailed in procedures like the ones you receive from us, and in the TMI itself provides guidance on this, because you do have a requirement if you hold one of these approvals to continuously report to CASA as you add new areas to your overall BVLOS footprint. Now, your remote pilot is going to share some requirements in this as well, even though they're not the responsible person. It's very important that they're prepared to validate the sites through their regular flight planning. So this is not a second guessing of what was already done, but it's checking for things that might change, particularly if a site was approved 3 to 6 months ago. Airspace and ground risk changes rapidly. So they should be going through their regular flight planning stage and checking for things that may have changed. Like, for instance, is there a new restricted airspace? Is there a new NOTAM that introduces a new stakeholder? Is there a change to airspace classification? Has a new aerodrome popped up, which does happen? They should also be scanning the area in terms of ground risk to ensure that they're planning for any new areas of ground risk. So for instance, they may notice a new public park has been opened and renovated and is likely to have a higher density of people there. Their requirements there are to make sure that they gather all the information, pause or cancel the job if they are no longer confident that it meets the feasibility assessment, and take that to the CRP to fully assess and think through, does this still meet the feasibility that was conducted previously? And if not, start that process and reconduct feasibility assessment again for that area. So there are still going to be times when you need a standard BVLOS approval. So for instance, altitude is a big one. If you want to fly above 400 feet, you are going to need to look into a standard approval to get above that height, and that is 400 feet above ground level. So for instance, if you're using a powered lift platform or doing a really large area survey where you need to go up to a higher altitude for efficiency, standard BVLOS approval can be requested for much higher altitudes. There will also be times when population density is above 500 people and a suitable PRS option may not even exist, for instance. And it's common in many urban neighborhoods or near activity centers, like parks, recreational facilities, etc. A standard sail to approval may be the way to go to do certain levels of population density. Even if it can sometimes look pretty benign during your initial assessment, and then you happen to find one of those things on Google Earth and think to yourself, yep, I'm going to have to mitigate that in some way. Another big one is going to be controlled airspace. So when the need arises to operate in controlled airspace, which people are currently doing BVLOS, the differing mitigations available to you in airspace under a standard SORA template may be the way to go. Now, NOTAMs and the NOTAM originator program. So all BVLOS approvals require a NOTAM to be active prior to operating. And as operators are now going to be able to deploy to new BVLOS sites faster than they have in the past, you're also going to need to be able to deploy NOTAMs just as quickly because you need it active before you can fly. So any REOC holder can become a NOTAM originator through Air Services. That means you'll be able to actually stand up NOTAMs on your own through the NAPES portal. You'll be able to create them, modify them, and they're typically active within hours as opposed to within days. And this has a twofold application. So overall, it's less worry for you because you can stand it up yourself directly through that portal. And it's also going to reduce a bit of the paperwork burden on our PAS PAC, who currently handle our PAS NOTAMs for us. So becoming a NOTAM originator, if you have one of these approvals, to me and to Hover, is just a bit of a no-brainer. And I would strongly recommend looking into the originator program if you're looking into BVLOS area approvals, and particularly getting it organized before your responsible person assessment, because just going through the steps of signing up to the program, doing your first NOTAM, learning the data requirements, will also make NOTAMs a lot easier for you to read if you're a little inexperienced in that area. And one of the last things I want to touch on is having a really strong foundation. We as an industry have been asking for broad area BVLOS approvals in Australia for a long time, and we have them, and it is a big sign of trust from CASA in the maturity of the industry, and the regulatory requirements to conduct it are pretty significant around compliance and record keeping. So to make sure you're as successful as possible in this regard and that you're ready for any kind of surveillance event, there are some steps we recommend that you implement to ensure that your compliance program is really strong. So some of the things we do are weekly randomized assessment of flight logs. So just reviewing anywhere from, say, 2 to 10 flight logs, depending on the size of your operation, and ensuring that everything was completed in compliance with your procedures. Doing monthly reports on the number of flights and any reoccurring non-compliances or other issues that are coming up. And also just having visibility as to how much you're using all of your various procedures and all of your types of operations you can do. And what's important to derive from these reports is that you do complete an SMS report for any instances of non-compliance, no matter how minor, so that you have a documented record that you identified the issue, you looked into the sub-causes of the issue, and that you addressed it going forward. We would also recommend biannual and annual refreshers of any approved sites, instruments, documentation, procedures, and anything that builds up your regulatory compliance picture. We offer a really strong auditing program where we compare each requirement under the MOS to how you are fulfilling that requirement. And it's a really good thing to do every year to make sure that you know that you're meeting all these regulatory compliance requirements. And it puts you in a good position as well, if you have this strong foundation, to be ready for the level of record keeping that broad area BVLOS is going to bring to you, and that expanding your footprint and growing your team is going to bring as well. So if you have any queries or questions around compliance and maintaining it, feel free to reach out to us as well. And the last thing I'll do is ask if anyone has any questions, anything they want to add or throw into us. I believe we're heading over to our Q&A now. I will just check if there are any, because I'm sharing my screen and can't see at the moment. Yeah, we do have some questions. Just check, Lynn and Manny, did you guys want to jump back in as well for this part?
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. So there is some questions here. So guys, if you have any questions, just feel free to drop it into the chat box, and we will try our best to answer them one by one. So the first question is, what's the average wait time for a standard BVLOS approval?
Yep. So at the moment, we're seeing queue times anywhere in the 3 to 6 month range, which is from the point of submission to the point of being assigned to a CASA inspector. So it doesn't mean that that 6 months ticks over and you instantly get your approval. There's also the time for the inspector to assess if your application is correct, if they need to make any changes, and also if you need it to do a first-time flight assessment as well.
Okay, thank you. And this next question is, are there any requirements for the RPAS?
Yep, so similar to what you would see if you have a standard BVLOS approval or an EVLOS approval even, your RPAS needs to support certain features. So one of the requirements that I didn't actually touch on in my presentation is that you need to be able to support a geofence feature. You also need to have a programmed return to home or loss of link procedure that you're aware of and that the RPA will enact. And it's the standard, ensure it doesn't go above a certain height and returns to its home point wording that you see in a lot of instruments.
Okay. And next one is how can I plan for terrain regarding C2 link?
So in terms of planning for terrain, we use Global Mapper, but there's a lot of different tools that you can use to generate what's called a view shed, which will read the terrain data for you and calculate based on some radio variables that you input, such as the height of the receiver and the transmitter, what kind of electronic line of sight you will have. Now, it doesn't account for everything perfectly, so particularly if you're looking at very large areas, there may be some more complex methods to look at. But in generality, if you're looking within kind of the maximum range of a dock, you can get a pretty good picture.
Okay, thank you. And next one is okay, there are 3 questions in total for this one. So the first is the SolarMate KML generator with the buffer areas suitable for broad area BVLOS?
So at the moment, it hasn't been updated for a setting for the broad area BVLOS, which has the additional contingency volume requirements. But it is based on the Birkenstool, which is provided by the German FAA, which does have the ability for you to input some manual calculations. So it wouldn't be suitable right this second, but it is something that I've let the team know would be desirable.
Okay, next one is there a link to the CASA approved PIS?
Yes, there is. I will need to find that quickly for you, and I'll post it in the chat while I find it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And the next one is okay.
Sorry, what was the next question, Lynn?
Okay, next one is best way to book in for responsible person training.
Yeah, so we do provide it through Hover UAV. So if you just head over to our website, there will be an option to contact us directly if you have any questions or anything first. And there should also be a variety of different training sessions you can book, just outlaid through a calendar.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. And the next one is, in general terms, what is the maximum population you are able to fly over under BVLOS? For example, what about urban neighborhoods?
Yeah, so there isn't really a hard maximum in BVLOS in general. It's just once you get over a certain population density, depending on the aircraft you're using, it may fall out of the SORA framework, and it may be up to the regulator to provide you with a pathway to doing that. But if we're talking about, kind of the 1 meter drones, we have successfully sought approval for areas up to 5,000 people per square kilometer. And that's through a variety of mitigations. So it's partially sheltering, partially PRS. But you also have options like, gathering temporal data to prove that there are fewer people around at the time you're conducting your operations and other things like that. In terms of broad area, it is just the figures that are outlined in the TMI. And then in terms of regular, you do have a little more flexibility.
Okay, thank you. And next one is, so the under 1 meters requirement limits self-assessed BVLOS area approval to an aircraft about the size of the M4E?
I'm not sure I got that. Let me just have a look at the question. So, yeah, the Matrice for Enterprise does, from memory, fall into that 1 meter category as well.
Okay, thank you. And considering about the time, I think we can answer the last question. So the question is to increase safety through improved signal robustness, can an ROC operate 2 docks or 2 Dock 3 systems and use the second Matrix 4D as an airborne relay to maintain control and transmission for the primary Matrix 40 conducting the BVLOS mission?
I'll let you guys answer the technical aspect of if this is supported, but from a regulatory point of view, one operator should be operating one aircraft at a time unless you hold a one-to-many approval. So you can go out and seek that approval to be able to do something like this as a solo operator. But if you're not holding that approval, you would need another remote pilot to be operating that aircraft. You can still coordinate throughout the operation, but it'll need to be 2 pilots for one aircraft each, basically, unless you go through the one-to-many process.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. I think that's the end of the webinar. And thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, you can just feel free to reach out to us. And we are very, glad to help you here. And thank you. Yeah, see you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.